Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 6th Target Sheet webinar in the series presented by Virbac. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Alex, and I'm the product manager for the sheet range at Virbac, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's event. Tonight, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Graham Lane and Dr. George Cox on board to present on how you can optimize the health and productivity of your flock pre-joining. A bit of housekeeping to start with. You should be able to hear us, but we cannot hear you. If you are having technical issues, please call or text the number on your screen and I will do my best to help you out. If you do have any questions for Graham or George, please type them into the question box on your screen and we'll address them at the end of the session. Please be as clear as possible when asking questions so that we can give you the best possible answers. Tonight, we are giving away a 1 litre pack of Tridectin. At the end of the webinar, there will be a survey that will pop up on your screen. Simply answer the questions in this survey to go into the draw to win. You'll be notified via email within 24 hours if you have been successful in winning that prize. So, getting back into it, tonight we are joined by Dr. Graham Lane and Dr. George Cox. Graham Lane has 36 years experience consulting to farmers and agribusinesses in New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia, and South Australia, and has presented at conferences internationally as well as across Australia. He has spent 5 years as a lecturer position at the University of Melbourne in the Veterinary Faculty's McKinnon project and has authored a number of scientific papers. He has veterinary and finance qualifications and is an authorised representative to provide futures advice in agricultural commodities. Dr. George Cox is an experienced livestock veterinarian, having spent time in mixed rural practice in clinical product development and evaluation, training, marketing management, and technical services. George is a member of the Sheep, Camelid and Goat Vet and Australian Cattle Vet interest groups of the AVA and has a keen interest in livestock health and production. Now, before I pass over to Graham and George tonight, we'll be asking a few poll questions throughout this evening. These questions will help us get a better understanding of who you are and what information would be most beneficial to you. These questions are anonymous, so please be honest with your response. We'll start with one question. I'll pop that on your screen now. It's a nice simple one. Should be able to see that now. Which state are you from? And I haven't left out South Australia this time like I did the last webinar. Give it a few more seconds, guys. Some good responses coming through and a really good attendance for tonight as well. So thank you all for coming along. We'll close that in 3, 2, 1. Looks 34% from New South Wales and ACT. 48% from Vic and Tas, 10% from South Australia, and 7% from WA there as well. So majority coming from the eastern states tonight. So that's fantastic. Thanks for that, guys. As I said, we'll have some more poll questions throughout this evening. I'm now going to pass over to George Cox to get into it. There you go, George.
Can everybody see the screen?
Not at the moment,
Alex?
No.
Not.
Uh-oh. Technical difficulties. Bear with us, everyone.
Can you share again?
I'm going to do that now. Here we go. Let's try that.
Show my screen.
There we go. There it is.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Alex, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Please share your experience and ask questions as we go in the chat box to ensure that we all take something of value of this evening's presentation. We often miss opportunities either because we think about them for too long or because it just seems too difficult to do. Now, we can either focus on the challenges or we can turn them into opportunities. Now, even though the national flock is at its lowest level in decades, we are actually producing more lamb, and the demand will only grow over the next couple of years. The conditions out there have improved greatly, but even though we've had good rains and the outlook is really positive for some more, it is difficult to find quality replacement stock, and they are really expensive. The opportunity lies in producing more from the stock we currently have. So we're faced with two options. Either we produce more lambs per ewe, or we buy in ewes. And I must say I prefer the first. If you do decide to buy in ewes, do not compromise on your biosecurity. You really don't want to introduce somebody else's problems on your property, and always be mindful of the quality of the animals you buy in as well. You don't want to take 3 steps backwards. Now let's consider the factors that actually affect our lambing percentage. Now most of us select for fertility, and that includes the genetic ability of both the ewe and the ram. We normally take care of any health issues that may affect reproduction, like brucellosis or CAMPy. We feed them well because we know that a good condition score at joining and lambing is really important. But we don't always consider embryo survival, and we seldomly think about ovulation rate, even though it's the most important factor in determining the number of lambs produced per ewe. Now, ovulation rates, unfortunately, are difficult to measure, but we all record our marking percentage. Now, how can we improve the marking percentage? Well, it's easy. It starts with nutrition. It's followed by nutrition again, and genetics is really, really important, as is the ovulation rate, and don't forget the ram. But don't worry, we will go into more detail in each of them. The first 4 areas, most of us understand and manage really well, but we often forget about the rams, and we never think about ovulation rates. Now, if we look at the first objective of good nutrition, it's maintaining the ewes in the right condition score. And what is the right condition score? We know that between 3 and 4 condition score, we will get, in most breeds, lambing rates higher than 120%. So that's the aim, between 3 and 4. How do we do that? Or what happens if we manage to attain that? We see fewer dries in the flock, and we increase the number of twins in the flock. You only get one shot at optimizing the conception rate. We can't add more lambs later in the season. We can only do things to limit the wastage after conception. We also know that ewes in good condition produce heavier lambs. And the heavier lambs is really important because they're more likely to survive through to weaning. So if the ideal birth weight between 3.5 and 5 kilograms gives you that survival rate of nearly 90% or more in the lambs. But if we don't have enough time to get the ewes into the right condition, we can consider flushing. That is feeding lupins prior to joining. Now, recommendations vary on quantity fed, the starting time, the duration, but the response can be really dramatic. We see up to a 30% increase in ovulation rates. But you don't need to flush if at least 85% of the ewes in the mob are above the target condition score of 3 at the start of joining, and that's the preferred state. Now, the third area of nutrition involves sufficient trace minerals to ensure that the sperm quality and quantity and the motility, to assist with ovulation and protect the fast dividing embryos. Now, special attention needs to be given to those trace minerals involved in the antioxidant system. Traditionally, we've only been concerned about avoiding deficiencies, but today we know that a strategic top-up of trace minerals, when they are really needed, improves both fertility and immunity and improves performance of the flock. Now, Alex has another bold question for us.
Thank you, George. Another simple one for everyone. Have you used multi-min before? Quick apology to my Queensland friends as well. I did leave them out of the state poll this time as well. So sorry. One day I'll include all state and territories. It did look funny when I put it up. Well, wait a few more seconds for some responses to come through. We'll close it in 3, 2, 1. So a good mix there. Seems like everyone knows what they're doing and know if they use it or not. So 57% say yes, they have, and 40% say no, and 3% are unsure. Back to you, George.
Well, thanks, Alex. That is a really good result, and I'm sure a lot of you can share the benefit that you saw by using Multimin. But assuming proper nutrition, the use starts off with sufficient levels of trace minerals at joining. Then she uses some of those trace minerals during the to support pregnancy, and just before lambing, she channels as much of the trace minerals as she can into the lamb. Now the lamb is born with about 3 to 4 times the level of trace minerals present in the ewe. Because of this, the ewe's immune system is compromised, leading to the periparturient rise in worm egg counts. And that is why giving an effective and persistent range like Cydectin long-acting or Tridectin, the new moxidectin containing 3-weight range, pre-lambing is so important to protect the ewe and her lambs. At pre-lambing, we also give the 6-in-1 booster vaccination, and we expect that enough antibodies will go through the colostrum to protect the lambs for the first 6 weeks. And that is why it's really important, why giving Multimin pre-joining and pre-lambing gives us such consistent returns. The latest result from a trial done in Victoria again confirmed these benefits. Now, this trial was completed last year. It involved 5 properties and more than 1,400 ewes, and we only treated the ewes pre-joining and pre-lambing. On average, we achieved 7.3% higher marking rates, and the lambs weighed on average 2 kilograms more at weaning, and weaning happened at 12 weeks. Now that is a significant difference just by supplementing Multimin to the ewe. That proves that we can reduce the loss from scanning to marking and improve the health of the lambs by topping up the ewe with trace minerals. Now, recapping nutrition, proper nutrition is required to ensure that more than 85% of the flock is in a body condition score of more than 3 before joining. We can use flushing if required. And remember, we've considered the importance of protecting the embryos for the first couple of weeks by topping up trace minerals at the required times. Selection for fertility is really important, and we should focus on selecting rams that produce ewes that wean more lambs, so the NLW breeding value. And we should select ewes for the number of lambs born at 3 years of age. If we do just those 2 things, we will really make appreciable genetic progress in the flock. But you may ask that if fertility is inherited and nutrition is optimal, can we further improve the ovulation rate of ewes? And the answer to that is the opportunity that is knocking at the door. OVASTIM is a vaccine that can increase lambing rates on average by 23%, but it could be a lot more for each of you. Now, you may know that the brain tells the ovary to produce eggs, 1 or 2, and the developing egg then produces messengers that tells the brain to stop sending that message. Now, that messenger is androstenedione, and OVASTIM vaccination provides antibodies that blocks that messenger to the brain. So it blocks the messages going back to the brain. The ovary keeps on producing eggs, and we get a higher ovulation rate in the ewes. The higher ovulation rate then results in more lambs, and it's really important that we scan the ewes for multiples and manage the ewes accordingly. Combining all of the results we have, we see that it doesn't matter whether you join in spring or in autumn. If the ewes are cycling, OVASTIM will deliver more lambs. There is a slight benefit in using it in autumn, you get a bit better response, and that is just due to the seasonality of breeding in sheep. The next graph illustrates the importance of condition. The heavier animals are the ewes that gave the better results. So where would you use OVASTIM? I would certainly use them in the last two groups, and I would consider using flushing or lupins in the first two to improve the results of those. Now, Alex has another poll question for us.
Thank you, George. The next question. Up on your screen now. Have you used Regulin before? Close that one down in 3, 2, 1. So a bit different to our multi-min respondents. 11% saying yes and 89% saying no. George, I'll put up the final poll question now as well. And the final question: have you used OVASTIM before? Three, two, one, looking very similar to the previous question in terms of responses here. We'll close that one down. So we've got 5% saying yes and 95% saying no and 0% saying unsure. Back to you, George.
Oh, that is exactly what we thought, and that's what's making the opportunity so big. So if you're joining in spring or summer, you can manage the seasonality in British breeds by using melatonin, and that's the active ingredient in Regulin, and OVASTIM together to produce significantly more lambs. Now remember, Regulin or the melatonin will trick them into thinking it's autumn, and they will start cycling, and OVASTIM then increase the ovulation rate. So you have to use both. If you use them individually, you do not get a similar response in animals that are not cycling. So using them together, you can get up to 33% more lambs per ewe joined. Now, how much work is involved? Well, it's a vaccine. So the first year, we unfortunately have to give 2 doses. The initial vaccination is 6 to 9 weeks prior to joining, and the second dose is not closer than 3 weeks prior to joining. The ideal time is 4 weeks prior to joining. That is the same time that you already give multimin and maybe other reproductive disease vaccines like Campi. If ewes are to be bred out of season, you need to use teasers 2 weeks prior to joining just to get them cycling. Join them then for 35 days, and remember that after week 13 or 14, OVASTIM will have no effect on the ovulation rate any longer. The second year is a lot easier. You only have to give the second dose at the same time that you give multimin 4 weeks prior to joining, and it'll maintain the effect in previously vaccinated ewes. Only the new maiden ewes will have to get the double vaccination. So really easy to do, and by that single vaccination, you increase the ovulation rate of your ewes, you increase the lambing percentage, and you increase the profitability of the sheep enterprise. Now, the ewes are really, really important, but never forget the rams. And so the breeding soundness examination should be done 3 months prior to joining. And that is because spermatogenesis takes about 2 months. So if you top up with multimin then, you will improve the semen quality and quantity. It also gives you time to find replacements should any of the rams fail the exam. You have to do a full clinical evaluation though. So it has to involve the teeth, the torso, the feet, the testes and the dorsal. All the attributes required for successful joining needs to be intact. Rams, unfortunately, tend to be more susceptible for parasites. And if you buy rams in, they can be the source of a resistant worm population. So a good quarantine procedure is really essential. Again, use tridectin that contains moxidectin that works on 43% more farms compared to ivermectin and contains 3 broad-spectrum actives. And on top of this, add a new molecule like monopentyl or Solvix to make sure that no worm survives. Do a worm count on the ewes as well and drench them if required. Again, tridectin is a good choice because of its short ESI, so you can get rid of the empties after scanning. Now, joining is a stressful time for rams, believe it or not. Thus, it's really important to ensure that the vaccinations are up to date and that you boost their immunity by topping up with Multimin. So grab the opportunity, ask your local Verbeek area sales manager to tell you more about the target sheep program to help us do the right things at the right times to ensure optimal performance. So even if you don't understand the product totally, we can certainly help you to get better results. Now, I spoke to a New South Wales advisor yesterday who agrees with the polls that OVASTIM is grossly underused. One of his customers the previous year wanted to improve his scanning result of 115%, and he recommended him to use OVASTIM. And on his recommendation, the producer marked 150% lambs the next season. So marked 150% lambs. So if you do everything right, be prepared for a lot more lambs. Now we can model the benefit of increased lambing rate, and some people are really good at that. So Graham, at the current prices, considering the additional cost, will it pay to use OVASTIM?
Thanks, George. I'll flick over to you now, Graham, and you can answer George's questions.
Thank you, George and Alex. Thank you. Thanks for that excellent presentation, George. That was great background to OVASTIM. OVASTIM is a new product. Sorry, not an old. It's an older product. It's been around for a while, but the question is, with current prices, is it worthwhile? And that's a good question, George. So we'll start off with what we aim at is nice pastures, nice ewes, and plenty of lambs, and that's what we want to end up with. So if we look at, I'm going to analyse the benefit by using a CSRO developed program called GrassGrow. GrassGrow is a bioeconomic model of pasture and livestock systems, and it's very good at simulating what actually happens in livestock and pasture systems. Oh. So the other benefit of using GrassGrow is it's been extensively validated under Australian conditions, and it's very good at predicting what actually happens. So to the extent that in some trial work that it's been tested against, the results from GrassGrow simulations were different from what was actually published from these trials, and the GrassGrow developers could not reconcile easily the difference. So they went back to the researchers and asked to look at their original data, and in some cases there's been corrections of those original papers based on GrassGrow identifying that there were the original papers had errors in them. So it's very good. It's a great model to use. OVASTIM was developed over 40 years ago to increase lamb percentage, and it's successful in doing that, as George has outlined. At the time of its release in the 70s and early 80s, the use of it was more marginal, and so it attracted some interest, and as we've already seen, some people use it with success, but it didn't attract widespread success. With much higher real meat prices now, livestock trading profit contributing so much more to gross margins of livestock operations, whether they be merino or in fact prime lamb, is it time for a rethink? So My assumptions in this modelling was that we had a first cross ewe enterprise based at Hamilton, Victoria. We could run in other areas, but the basic output is and results are going to be fairly similar. But to keep it simple, we base it in Hamilton. Production is based on Agriculture Victoria's livestock farm monitor projects, benchmarking average for a maternal prime lamb enterprise. So it's very good at predicting what that will do, and it's optimally stocked and fertilised with improved pastures of ryegrass and clover, perennial ryegrass and clover, at a stocking rate of 8 ewes per hectare with follow-on ewe lambs and ram flock. And this flock at that stocking rate is very similar to the top 20% of prime lamb producers in Western Victoria. The flock lambs in mid-July, with a 1st of July stocking rate of 15 DSE per hectare. Turns off trade lambs, and those are sold all by early January, and that's trying to keep it simple, but also it reflects what many typical enterprises in this region do. And it means 20% more lambs born by using OVASTIM, but because of the higher reproductive rate and more lambs being carried by the ewes, their energy requirements and the amount of pasture they eat is higher. So to make the midwinter stocking rate, that 1st July stocking rate, the same in both enterprises, the OVASTIM treated enterprise and the non-OVASTIM treated enterprise, I've had to reduce the number of ewes run in the OVASTIM treated flock to 7.8 ewes per hectare. So to summarise, there's nothing like a free lunch. There's a cost in those additional lambs that OVASTIM produces, so we have to account for it. I've used current prices or a little bit less than current price of 900 cents per kilo for lamb and 700 cents for mutton. These are pretty high prices, but historically, but they are only slightly higher than the 2-year average. Certainly, the 2-year average for prices have been high, and fundamentally that reflects the demand emanating from a number of markets. Certainly, China has been very strong, but the whole of developing Asia and also the MK market, the Middle East, etc., are also competing strongly on the lamb we produce. So though we're producing more, they compete strongly, they want more, and it's more than likely that they're going to take more of it because it's been a trend over time. It's not something that's just suddenly happened over the last year. For example, for China alone, McKinsey Global Institute published a report late last year, and they predict that given China's increasing wealth and such a massive population, that in 5 years' time, their luxury demand will increase by 65%. And lamb isn't a standard dinner for households around the world. It's mainly consumed in luxury restaurants, high-end restaurants, and as such, it's enjoys high demand, particularly in Asia. Further, this African swine fever has been impacting on the Chinese pig herd. The Chinese pig herd was massive, and that deficit is likely to be equal to the whole global protein meat supply of poultry, pork, beef, and lamb. So there's a big gap in meat protein supply globally emerging. All that we've done with COVID-19 is put that off. So I think that Asian growth post COVID-19 will support even higher prices than current prices. So I'm quite comfortable using the current prices to be realistic to all the listeners about what might be the benefit of using a product like OVASTIM. So on top of all that, we've got restocker pressure from New South Wales and Northern Victoria after 3 years of drought, and it's quite a significant demand. It's more a significant supply pressure that there won't be the supply of sheep on the market, obviously particularly mutton, but lamb too. And what about the cost? Well, we've run standard costs of the prime lamb the benchmarking prime lamb member price, and we've added into the OVASTIM treated flock $3 per year for OVASTIM usage. That's based on $2.50 a dose. The first year it's going to cost $5 for the 2 doses, then $2.50 subsequently. Just a note on that pricing, that's certainly at the higher end of what you might obtain it for commercially, but I'm not trying to make a judgment about what the price might be for you finally. We've got agent commission on the sales, so we're not selling direct. Lambs were not fed and were sold early January if they'd got to wait to be sold. So this is the stocking rate at 8 ewes per hectare of the untreated flock, and as we can see in mid-July, 1st July, sorry, the stocking rate is at 15 DSC per hectare. Then comes the lambs and a massive ramp up in feed demand, and the flock's stocking rate peaks in about mid-October, associated with weaning at about nearly 34 DSC per hectare, and then it slowly declines as lambs are sold off, and at the end early January they're all sold off and the stocking rate comes right back. In contrast, our stocking rate for the OVASTIM treated ewes at 7.8 ewes per hectare is also at 15 DSC per hectare in 1st of July. However, because there's more lambs, the demand ramps up to nearly 36 DSC per hectare at its peak in mid-October. And then again, as sales commence, this demand falls off. So to answer George's question, what did we find? The OVASTIM treated farm produces 48 kilograms more meat. Of course, it produces slightly less mutton because there's less ewes, but there was 53 kilos per hectare more lamb, which is obviously a high-priced product. The lambs sold in the end were 0.2 kilos lighter on average due to more twins being on the deck. The average annual stocking rate of the 8 ewes per hectare untreated mob was 19.9 DSC per hectare, but the OVASTIM treated mob, because they've got more lambs, averaged out at 20.5 DSC per hectare. Both are fairly similar, but there is high utilisation of the pasture grown by the OVASTIM treated ewes. This resulted in a higher gross margin, so it was increased by 10% to around $7 per DSC, which converts into $18 per ewe extra profit for an investment of $3 per head per year, and that's $18,000 extra profit per 1,000 ewes treated. That's an exceedingly good return. So further, testing lower lamb and mutton prices doesn't make a lot of difference. At the 2-year current price average, around 700 cents for lamb and 600 cents for mutton, the advantage for OVASTIM treated ewes was still high at $6 per DSC or $14 per ewe. And the lamb growth rates, as you can see, the middle thicker line is the 50th percentile seasons, or the median season, and it's hunting around for most of the spring till weaning at 300 grams per head per day, then tails off. And similarly, the OVASTIM treated ewes are also up around that 300 grams per head per day and jumps after weaning. The growth path, again, they end up around a solid growth path which starts to plateau off, but by early January they're up to 55 kilos. That's the average, of course. And similarly, the OVASTIM treated animals are also fairly similar at close to 55 kilos. Only 0.2 of a kilo difference between them. So in summary, if we assume that it's 20% more lambs born, which is a bit more conservative, we increase costs because we've got an OVASTIM treatment included, but we have the same assuming the same midwinter stocking rate, we need to run slightly less ewes, but because the OVASTIM treatment results in 53 kilograms per hectare more lamb. This results in a significant profit increase of $7 a DSC and $18 per ewe. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Graham. Thank you, George. That was fantastic. I'll just share my screen really quickly. There we go, and we're back. Yeah, guys, thanks again, Graham, George. That was awesome. Just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, please ask them now. I can see a few coming through. We have both George and Graham here to answer any questions you have on the topics tonight or anything around parasitology. We may also have a special guest, Paola, I think is on the line, who is our technical services manager for nutrition, who can also answer any questions around nutrition or multi-min as well. Before we jump into the questions though, if you would like more information on OVASTIM, you can download a free detailer. This is in your go-to panel. You can click on the handouts heading, click down the down arrow and double click on the PDF titled OVASTIM Detailer to grab that now or before the end of the session. If you do have any troubles, let me know and I can send me an email and I can organize that for you as well. Now we have a very exciting webinar series coming up, which will delve much deeper into pre-joining. In this series of webinars, you'll hear from producers and industry experts who will provide you with insights into the tips and tricks they use on their properties to set up for lambing pre-joining. To register for this webinar series, you can follow the link on your screen or just Google OVASTIM, head to the product page there, or Google Verbac webinars. Great, we're moving on to questions now. We have a few coming in. I'll just get the first one up now. All right, so first question, and that's a good one. Have any studies looked at the use of OVASTIM and or Regulin specifically in merinos or only in fat lamb breeds? If not, then theoretically, is there any differing considerations for use in merinos? Very good question.
That is a really good question, and as Graham mentioned, the product was developed 40 years ago, and the merino has changed a lot over the last couple of years. So unfortunately, the label still says do not use in merinos, and that's purely because of the mothering ability of the merinos at that stage. Graham, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, look, quite simply, there's no solid biological reason why, if you've got fecund merinos who have got high lambing percentages, rear twins and grow well, why you would not be able to get a response out of them. I don't think there's any biological reason for that. But at the time when the product was developed, merinos didn't have very high fertility rates, but there's now strains that achieve well over 100% marked, and also the Dooney merino, they biologically they would probably respond well.
Great, thanks guys. I think that answers the question. Next question, for both of these products, OVASTIM and Regulin, is the injection site the same as all vaccines?
Again, that's a really good question. The OVASTIM injection site is exactly the same. The melatonin implant, I'm not sure. Graham, can you help me there?
Sorry, George, I missed that a little bit. Just repeat that, please.
The Regulin implant. Can you do
implant.
that in the same site as a normal vaccination?
No, well, the Regulin is an implant that goes in the ear, so it certainly wouldn't be very good to vaccinate the ear. In short, they're different sites.
Really good.
Yes, you can tell Regulin's not a Verbac product. Okay, next question. Is there this is going to be for Regulin and OVASTIM. Is there a withhold, for example, an ESI on both of these products?
Again, we can only speak for OVASTIM, and there is no withhold on OVASTIM.
Just to add, OVASTIM, I mean, OVASTIM is a vaccine, so there's no withholds on vaccines.
I can confirm there is a nil meat and milk withhold on Regulin as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Next question. Welfare considerations of having multiples greater than twins? Question mark.
Graham, do you want to answer that question?
I'm not sure. To be honest, I didn't quite catch it. Can you run
So
that one?
are there any? I'll reword it. Are there any welfare considerations of having? Oh, geez, a big question just came up. Of having multiples greater than twins?
Okay, very good question. It depends whether you're going to get survival out of them. So I would not consider. Well, there's guidance that if you're marking less than 100, sorry, not less than 140, more than 140%, I believe. Is that right, George? 130, 140. You shouldn't be using OVASTIM. And the key reason for that recommendation is because of triplet management. Twins convert into triplets in greater numbers. They're very low numbers, but they convert more into triplets when you're getting higher than 170% scanning rates. Okay, so and that converts into 140, 150% marked. And so if you're marking more than 130, 140%, by using OVASTIM, you are going to convert twins into triplets. And my experience is that there are some clients of mine who I work with that who have success with triplet management, and for those people, OVASTIM may well work well. But if you don't have that expertise, using OVASTIM is likely, if your ovulation rates, if your scanning rates are fairly high, then using OVASTIM could well result in more triplets, which, if you don't rear them well, is simply going to increase the number of lambs that you don't rear well. So that could be an issue.
Great. And
I think a bit of common sense in terms of its use in that situation is required.
Great. Now, thanks, Graham. George, I think you'll confirm that over 140% is when you would consider not using OVASTIM anymore. Is that right?
That is, the label says between 70 and 140. Yep. Except if your management is really good.
Yep.
Can I just add that the average land marking percentage in that Southwest Farm Monitor project benchmarking results has been about 115% for a number of years. So for the average producer, OVASTIM would result in a lot more twins and a lot more profit.
Great. No, thanks, guys. All right, next question. This one might be for Paola here. It is a big one, so bear with me. Could you give us any advice on increasing birth weights on our ewes? Our ewes are crossbred 3 and 4 condition score, and we give multimin prior to joining and lambing, and we have a very high percentage of multiples, but struggle to get high birth weights with so many multiples. What is the acceptable survival rate? Hopefully I've asked that question correctly. Paola.
Yes. Yeah, that's a long question.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, as George mentioned earlier, everything it's going around nutrition. So if you have a very good nutrition pre-lambing, it's more likely that you have higher survival rates in your lambs. So, and also more survival in your ewes. So that's the thing that you have to start looking at is, are you losing the lambs? Are you losing the ewes? So you have mismothering problems, and these can be around nutrition. So you need adequate nutrition pre-lambing to have the ewes to lamb in adequate body conditions to improve lamb survival. So independent if you use or not multimin pre-joining, the pre-lambing treatment and nutrition has to be adequate to ensure you have adequate marking percentage. I don't have the exact numbers, so that's probably Graham can help me with the exact numbers and the benchmarks. But adequate nutrition, it's necessary for land survival.
Great, thanks, Pella. I hope we addressed that question. If we don't yet, again, shoot me an email if you wish, and we can address it following the webinar. I can forward those on to any of our speakers tonight. Next question. What will happen if I increase the dose of OVASTIM?
I think there's one for George.
It's a vaccine, so yeah, you will not get a better effect, so you'll just be wasting your money.
So you won't get 200%.
You will not get 200%.
Marking, okay, good to know. All right, next question. Will OVASTIM reduce my empties?
No, remember OVASTIM has an effect on the ovulation rate. So if your ewes are not cycling, you need to do something else. So either it's a nutritional issue or it's seasonality, and you have to use a product like Regulin, but it will not get the ewes to cycle.
And that's an important point. OVASTIM and Regulin are very different products. I'm going to include, when we conclude the questions tonight, I'm going to include a link to a webinar that was done by the MLA a while back, which goes through Regulin and OVASTIM and does a comparison as well. It's quite a good webinar. So I'll link that to everyone as well at the end of this. Very good watching. This is our last question. So guys, if you have any more to put through, please do it now. Otherwise, we'll end following the answering of this final question. So what will happen if I use OVASTIM on pregnant ewes?
Again, absolutely nothing. It is a vaccine that blocks that messaging system from the follicle to the brain. So if you vaccinate pregnant ewes, they will remain pregnant. It will have no impact on the pregnancy.
Great, guys. Last chance to ask any questions now. We've got Paolo on the line, Graham and George. I will continue. All right. Well, what's happened there? There we go. Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending tonight. Thanks George. Thanks Graham. Thanks Paolo as well. This is one in a many of series of webinars VERBAC are running in 2020. This is the 6th in the series of the Target Sheep series as well. To see a full list, you can follow the link now on your screen or simply Google VERBAC webinars. Thanks everyone for attending today. We hope you got a lot out of the session and the series as a whole. You can check out the recordings on our website as well if you want to jump back and check out the first 5 of the series. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, George. Thank you everyone for coming along. A survey will pop up following this webinar. Don't forget to complete this as well. It's got a chance to win a 1 litre Troectin pack. And please keep an eye out for a follow-up email with all the important information from this webinar, including details on the Troectin promotion, a full list of upcoming webinars, and links to past webinars and more. And it looks like no more questions have come through, so we will finish the webinar there. And once again, thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, Alex, George, and attendees.